the reason we're here. It's going to be a winning culture, and we're here to win football games. Right? Terry's done a great job, along with the people and the help around this building, in order to form the team and put them in position to go out there and win, right? It's a big old elephant in the back of the room, and who's going to be the trigger man, who's going to do those things, and let's go collaborate together. Let's go figure out those things. Let's go put ourselves in the best position to go win football games, and I got a lot of confidence in the people in this room that we can.
Welcome back, Falcons fans. Your boy Bryce Lewis back at it again for more Atlanta Falcons content. And as you can see, I have a special guest with me, Miles Garrett, anchor and sports reporter with Fox 5 Atlanta, also host of Bulldogs Final. Miles, been on here a few times. Glad to have you back, man. How are you?
Doing well, Bryce. How about yourself?
I'm doing pretty good, man. And you know, I feel even better because it feels like, you know, once again, when you go through these cycles, we are starting a new era of Falcons football. Raheem Morris, new head coach, just had his introductory press conference yesterday, and there were a lot of things that were said that I think people were obviously made them excited, and then there's some things that made them wonder, okay, what's to come after this? And so I wanted to get your thoughts on that today about what's going on. And I'll start with this. So overall, we'll start with the overall. Overall, after, you know, listening to the presser, everything that he said, what is your overall feeling on Raheem Morris as a hire for this team at this very current moment in time?
Yeah, I mean, I think if there's, you know, the saying to win a press conference, I think Raheem Morris did so yesterday. I think you kind of saw what, you know, Brett Jukes, a lot of these Falcons folks online were talking about, just how well he interviewed and, you know, his passion for Atlanta and all that kind of stuff. I think that was really evident in his press conference yesterday. You could really see how important it is to him, and really kind of a 180 personality-wise from Arthur Smith, and, you know, kind of how he is with the media. You know, we don't know how he is with the players, of course, but as far as from a media standpoint, you know, winning press conferences and whatnot, I think Raheem did a very good job of that. And I think he answered questions very concisely, very well, as much as he could. You know, Arthur Smith tended to kind of leave things vague at times with what things were, what their plans were. I think Raheem kind of did the opposite. Which, you know, us as media, we certainly appreciate. Yeah, I mean, I did like the questions regarding, you know, what has he learned since the last time he's been a full-time head coach, from his days in Tampa Bay to, you know, when he was interim head coach in Atlanta. So I think there were a lot of good things to take away from it.
Yeah, definitely. And I think, you know, he seemed excited. You could see the energy. Yeah. You could see that he was like, this was home. He called it home multiple times. You know, he's talked about his history with the Blanks. He talked about his history just in Atlanta in general. And so from what when you heard that and you heard him explain that, what do you think that meant for him to be able to come back and this be the job that he gets his second chance in?
Yeah, I think it means all that much more. You know, I think I compare it a lot to the Dan Campbell hire with Detroit a few years ago, just kind of that passion, that energy for, you know, how much he cares about being where he is. That I don't think that's lost on him. You know, he mentioned, you know, this is the third time he's been hired by Rich McKay. I know Falcons fans, you know, maybe feel a certain way about Rich McKay, but regardless, I think that does mean something. You know, his comfortability with Atlanta, Mr., you know, Arthur Blank, and the team itself. I mean, there were some guys who, you know, who were heavily involved with the Falcons that were very big fans of this hire. I mean, he said it yesterday, you know, I want to see Arthur Blank hold up a Super Bowl trophy. I want to see work done, hold it up for this team. You know, so he understands kind of the history of this franchise and, you know, the big members of it, and what it means to them to finally maybe hoist up that trophy one day. It's never happened before. And I think he does understand that and can sympathize with a lot of Falcons fans, coaches, players alike, to kind of get over this hump that they've struggled to get over for their entire history.
Yeah, definitely. And I think that's something that, you know, he also touched on is just, you know, bringing a Super Bowl. He mentioned his expectations. First thing you got to start with is just winning the NFC South.
Yeah.
Win the NFC South, get into the big dance, and then we can look at further expectations. But one thing that he also pointed out a couple of times yesterday, he talked about Terry a lot. He talked about collaboration. He talked about, you know, he was jealous of Sean McVay and Les Snead and their relationship with the Rams. And you could tell that he seemed very excited. Terry seemed very excited. We've seen all the smiles. You know, people are making jokes. I don't think he ever smiled like this with Arthur, everything like that. Like, you can tell that was big. And it was big for Terry, too. And, you know, can you maybe go into a little bit about, you know, how important that is, especially since Terry led the search And this is the man that he's chosen to say, I think me and him can collaborate and create the vision and the team that we want moving forward.
Yeah, it's extremely important. Obviously, that GM head coaching relationship is paramount in order to have a successfully run franchise. And I think it was important for Terry to kind of get ahead of that yesterday, because the last time we heard from the Falcons brass, it was Arthur Blank and Rich McKay, and I think the big question was, where's Terry Fontenot? What is his role in figuring all this out? Usually you think that the general manager is a part of that coaching search, and that initial press release that we got said that there would be input from Terry Fontenot. We weren't quite sure what that role was. Then yesterday we hear Terry Fontenot led the charge as far as leading that coaching search. So whatever actually happened, I guess you got to take Terry Fontenot at his word. But because of that, I think it's very encouraging to have your general manager be the one who's leading the charge, and based on his track record thus far, as far as getting players, the free agency above all. And then, I think this last draft class was huge for Terry Fontenot. I think he had his best draft class thus far, and free agent class, of course, we know what they did. But as far as building the roster the right way and what the coach wants, understanding what the coach wants, I do think there was an element to that with Arthur Smith, because they did say that a lot, that collaborative effort, I do think there was, again, an element of, who was the one really calling the shots, whether that was Arthur Smith or Terry Fontenot, but they were very adamant about that relationship was very important. So the fact that Arthur Smith was hired first last time and not Terry Fontenot, I think makes this one a little bit different from that regard, because Terry Fontenot was the one making the call this time. Among others, we heard that word collaborative a lot. I tweeted out a video of how many times it was said in that press conference. But I think it's huge to have both of those guys on the same page, and to sort of emulate what was going on in LA. Obviously, the Rams are kind of a poster child for success the last, I think you could call it 6 or 7 years, with how they run that organization, the head coach and the general manager. Obviously, we know what Sean McVay can do as a head coach, but it's not lost on the role of Les Snead up there, to what, how important their success has been. So I think that's huge, and I'm excited to see their relationship kind of expand from here.
Yeah, definitely. And I think, listen, the biggest thing you can have is just that equilibrium between your GM and your head coach being on the same page, and having the same vision moving forward to get this team in the right direction, which is to win Super Bowls, to win the NFC South, to become a successful and sustained winning culture. And that takes a lot of work, but this roster obviously isn't in a place where it was maybe when Raheem was the first time head coach and when Terry became the GM. They're not in rebuilding situations. This team is more prepared to win now. So that leads me to my next thing. Obviously, the biggest question of the offseason for the Falcons is going to be the quarterback position. Who will be the quarterback for this team? Yesterday, Raheem mentioned that they haven't talked about it in detail yet, but they've talked about it in passing. But he did mention he wanted a quarterback who was an elite processor, obviously having Matthew Stafford in LA and then Matt Ryan here. So some people are wondering, okay, who does that eliminate? Does that mean one quarterback now is more likely? Even though, like you said, we haven't talked about it in detail. So what did you take from those comments when he mentioned the quarterback situation? Because he knows also that's going to be the biggest question that everybody's going to have.
Yeah, I mean, it's the $1 million question, right? I don't think anyone really knows outside of Flowery Branch. And that very well could have been bluff. Maybe I'm sure Raheem and Terry have had more in-depth conversations about the quarterback position than they led us to believe yesterday. And that's okay. I mean, he's still putting together his staff and figuring all that out. But at the same time, I mean, they're going to have to figure that out. I don't care if you're Bill Belichick, Raheem Morris, Jim Harbaugh, you're going to have that quarterback. And that was ultimately Arthur Smith's undoing here in Atlanta, because, I mean, if you really had, I think, average quarterback play last year, this team wins the South and is in the playoffs. How far they get in the playoffs, who knows? But I think it's no doubt this team would have been a playoff team if they had average quarterback play last year. So there's a lot of options. They discussed that, or Terry Fontenot did with our DJ Shockley yesterday, kind of talking about, hey, we're going to look at the draft, free agency, trades. It's going to be, option rich, I think you could call it, this offseason, whether that's, a guy like Justin Fields, Kirk Cousins, any of those veterans who are out there on the market, Russell Wilson, maybe. Then you obviously know the draft and who's going to be there. I think it's kind of top heavy in regards to Caleb Williams, Drake May, and Jaden Daniels, because, I think you could call a different tier with Michael Penix Jr. and the Bo Nixes of the world. But to get one of those guys, it's looking like you're probably going to have to trade up. And the Falcons, I think, have the assets to finally do that. I think in years prior, they were still trying to build out the rest of the roster. You didn't want to mortgage your entire future yet, just because of where the roster was. I think this roster is now more ready-made, as you were saying, because of the free agency acquisitions, because now, like you said, you're just kind of a quarterback away at this point to really being a competitive team and taking that next step towards being a playoff contender. So I think they have the assets to potentially do that. You're going to get an extra pick most likely with the Calvin Ridley trade. That's an extra thing you can trade away and give you more ammo. I think if you're ready to say that, hey, we need to make that quarterback decision this offseason, which to me, based on what they said yesterday, it seems like they are. They were very seemingly set in stone as far as what Terry Fontenot said. Like, we admire Taylor Heineke and Desmond Ridder for, giving their best, but obviously we need to improve. And of course he kept it broad, but to me, that signaled that we're going to be going after a quarterback this offseason. And I think you have to. I don't think there's really even a question that, you could stick with one of those two guys for next season just because of what their performance was last year. But yeah, it'll be interesting. I'm sure we'll figure out more, as the process goes along, with the combine, the pro days. And, I think, right now it's still kind of the figuring out mode. The staff is still being put together. The scouting department, I'm sure, is getting ready for different things. So we probably won't have an answer on that for a while. But it'll definitely be exciting to figure out once that guy is here, because it'll be a fresh start. And as you know, the quarterbacks become face of the franchise. So it'll be cool to see who will be that next guy in charge of the Falcons.
Yeah, definitely, for sure. And, to follow up on that, obviously the quarterbacks from last year, Ridder, Heineke, fan base expects one of them won't be here, maybe both. We don't obviously know what they think of that. So I just want to maybe get your quick opinion on that. Do you think, you probably think Heineke more likely to probably get cut? Ridder is going to be the guy who, okay, do they keep him as a backup? He doesn't cost you anything right now still. What do you think? Is Ridder, is there a decent chance Ridder may still be on the roster after they find the quarterback?
Yeah, I think so. I think Taylor Heineke is the easy candidate that you would theoretically cut just because of his price tag and how much money you can save. And then, as you said, like, Dez is cheap right now. He's still on his rookie deal. And I don't think there's anything wrong with Desmond Ridder as a backup quarterback. I think he showed enough this season to where you could warrant an argument for him being the backup quarterback. He, like him or not, he won you some games last year. And there were some good things that he did out there on the field. Just granted, probably not a starting quarterback for your team, but I think there were some good things that he did. I think to call him a complete failure and say that he didn't do anything for you would be wrong. He did do good things and had some great throws. So I don't think it would be a problem to have him on the team as a backup quarterback. Now, could he be an asset in a trade if you're trying to get a guy who, a team like, let's say, who knows, the Kirk Cousins of the world, for example. That could be a piece you trade just to have a guy in Minnesota that is more, comfortable. You replace a body with a body type guy. Now, I'm sure Minnesota wouldn't want Desmond Ridder as their starter, but he's just a guy you can kind of get in there. He's not Josh Dobbs. Maybe a guy that has a little bit more rep to his name, because obviously Josh Dobbs, he had a good run, but it's not necessarily, sustainable, kind of like Desmond Ridder was as a starter. So maybe you replace him as a cheaper option there on the roster. I don't know, but I think that's just an example of what you could do with Desmond Ridder. But to answer your question, I don't see an issue with keeping Dez on the roster as a backup quarterback.
Yeah, for sure. And I think too, you never know. I always like to say, new coach, new regime. Obviously, you can see the way Morris has filled out his staff, way more assistance with the position coaches. You can clearly see attention to detail is big for him, and he wants to make sure every position is getting coached up to the fullest of its capacity.
He wasn't a quarterback coach last year.
Exactly, in which, we can get into why that wasn't the case, but that was very true. That wasn't. So now let me go to this. So this is the funny one that comes out of the presser. So Raheem was asked about what's exciting about the Falcons. He named two players, Drake London, Bijan Robinson, but no Kyle Pitts. So obviously people were like, is that a sign? Does that mean something? What do you think? Is that just us looking too deep into that? Does that mean something? What do you think, Miles?
I think it's us just looking too deep into it. I mean, he's up there. He's excited. First two guys that come to mind. I mean, Bijan Robinson, Drake London. I'm sure he's excited about Jesse Bates. Are we mad that he didn't say Jesse Bates or, any of those other guys on defense? AJ Terrell. I mean, I don't think that's something that fans should get too worked up about. It's like, oh, he didn't say Kyle Pitts. I think that's just fans reading too much into things. But yeah, I wouldn't be too concerned about that.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I really wouldn't be either. I think, I just think, everybody,
everyone reads into everything nowadays.
They're trying to connect, see into the future. Well, they might trade him, so they might be like, nobody's not going to leak their card like that out to the media.
No, not at all.
So,
especially in an introductory press conference.
Exactly. Yeah. That's kind of crazy to make that type of stance. But so one interesting statement he made yesterday was somebody asked him about would he coach the defense, and he said no. Jimmy Lake, the new defensive coordinator, will coach the defense, and he wants the coordinators to coach, and he wants to help out on both sides of the ball. The Falcons, the last couple of coaches, Quinn, when he was here, Dan Quinn, he coached the defense at times, took over. And then Arthur Smith coached the offense all 3 years as the offensive play caller. Can you talk about how that may be beneficial for him, Raheem, not putting that type of responsibility on himself to say, I got to get the game plan ready, and letting his coaches coach, and then him just assisting, especially because he's coached on both sides of the ball.
Yeah, and I think that goes back to the key word of that press conference, collaboration, and what he learned from his prior stops, in LA and in Tampa. He said, I don't need to be the smartest person in the room, whether that was a shot at Arthur Smith, who knows. No, I do think that, that's what he meant by that. I want to hire people who are good at what they do, and I can focus on being the best head coach I can be instead of dipping my hand in everything, really. Offense, defense. Raheem has obviously had experience coaching both sides of the ball, whether that's wide receivers or defensive coordinator, all that kind of stuff. He's got experience all over the field. So I do like that he was adamant about, I want my coordinators to coach that side of the ball. Now, again, it's all fun and dandy to say that right now. And, it's good, I think, at this moment to delegate that way. But as we know, things change. I mean, when Dan Quinn was head coach, I mean, he had a defensive coordinator, then took over as defensive coordinator because things weren't going well. So things can change very quickly in this league. It depends on the success that you're having, obviously. But we'll certainly see if things stay that way this time because, again, it's the NFL. Things change very, very, very quickly. And, it's nice right now when it's a fresh start and you're hoping for new things. But at this moment, I think it's a good thing. It's just time will tell if it ends up being a good decision.
Yeah, definitely. And I think that's what the exciting part of this, I guess, this offseason is. It's just it feels like, okay, we got a new voice, a new era, a new head guy, and what is that going to equal? What is that going to turn into? And is it going to result where we want it to go when the next season comes around? That Falcons are going to be favored in NFC South and they're going to be competing for something, feeling the urge of it means something again that we're having these expectations. So, that I think for the most part, Raheem to me has pretty much, been honest. I think, like you said, you mentioned this earlier, the media like the fact he's not as vague as Arthur Smith. I could tell he was trying to loosen you guys up, trying to hey, nobody has to be depressed. You know what I'm saying?
Oh, yeah.
I'm sure the media might like him more this year. So that definitely could be good for sure. So also, Miles, you were at the Senior Bowl last week. You were able to look at some potential future Falcons on there. I'm going to go ahead and ask, man, anybody stand out to you when you were over there at the Senior Bowl?
Yeah, I mean, obviously I know the big talking point was the quarterbacks. Obviously not the big headliners that were not there, the Jade Daniels, Caleb, and Drake. But Michael Penix and Bo Nix were there. And based on what I saw, I can't really say I'm excited about any of those guys at pick number 8. Michael Penix Jr., I could maybe see a late first round type guy. But based on what I saw, I don't know. I couldn't justify a pick number 8 just because of the talent that's going to be on the board. Bo Nix kind of the same. I mean, being down there, I could see that Michael Penix Jr. was the best quarterback. I think that was pretty clear that he was the best one there. Bo Nix, not really sold on. Sam Hartman didn't have a good week. Spencer Rattler, oddly enough, had a pretty good week, but I don't think anyone's talking about him being a first-round pick at the same time. But, for any dog fans out there, those were the guys still on the show in Mobile, especially Ladd McConkey. I think Ladd McConkey may have earned himself a first-round pick nod after what he was doing in the Senior Bowl this week. And really all of them, all throughout the field. I mean, Tyke Smith was defensive MVP for the American team. Marcus Rosemy-Jacksaint catches the first touchdown pass. Heard from a lot of scouts that he greatly improved his draft stock. Luke McCaffrey may know his last name, another good receiver. Brothers with Christian McCaffrey. Roman Wilson with Michigan, another good receiver that looked pretty good. And then I'm probably going to torch his name because I'm not very good at it. But Luatu Lutu with UCLA, the edge rusher. He looks pretty good. I think that's a guy that you could justify potentially taking at pick number 8. Edge rusher. The Falcons are going to hit on one eventually. It's just a matter of time when they actually get one right. Overall, I think that Ladd McConkey was definitely the best player that I saw. The Falcons will almost certainly take a player who was in that game because if history is, continuing with this regime with Terry Fontenot, their scouting process, they like guys from the Senior Bowl. So I wouldn't be surprised to see any more of those guys taken again.
Yeah, for sure. And, I think too, with the roster right now, Ladd's an interesting name. Like you said, he may work his way up into the first round. But, you get a second round pick, you keep it. I think, maybe the Falcons may need to consider Ladd just, you
need a number 2 receiver.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, you could even use him as number 2 or a slot. You could always have that safety net that a lot of teams like to have, that slot receiver position. So Ladd, I think, is a very interesting name that I think overall could be a good addition to the team moving forward. But last question before I let you go, Miles. So after everything, the press conference and everything like that, what do you think is the first thing will be addressed this offseason for this team? Do you think it's going to be we're hitting the ground running, boom, quarterback? Do you think this is going to be a process where throughout the last few off seasons they've seemed to always try to get value, and so they're going to try to look at positions and try to just pick certain players at certain spots to just improve there? Or do you expect them to make maybe a huge move out of the gate? We're talking if they wanted Justin Fields, the Bears might want to move him by the combine potentially or before the end of February. What do you think maybe, I guess it's like a prediction. What do you think maybe the first big move the Falcons make this offseason?
I think it won't be as sexy as fans might hope. Again, no one knows. So, this is all just speculation at this point. But I don't think it's going to be the big sexy move, at least the first one. I wouldn't be surprised, if they came out and said, oh, suddenly the Falcons have traded up to 3, 4 or something like that to go get a quarterback. I wouldn't be surprised if they did that. But I think that they're going to take their time and really do their homework with what they want to do with this because it's a huge decision. They got to get the quarterback right. So I think, they do have more money to spend in free agency again. It's not, like what they had last year, but it's not like years prior where they had no money. So I think we'll see some free agency moves before maybe they decide to go up and get the quarterback. My personal opinion, there's no, fact behind this at all. I just think that they will address quarterback in the draft personally. That's my opinion. I don't think that they're sold on Justin Fields, but it might change. Who knows? Chicago really is kind of playing their cards close to the chest, I think, right now with what they're going to do with Justin. I think it'll come to, free agent signings, some low-key guys. Maybe you get a receiver in the room, who knows? Maybe you get like a Mike Evans who could be available. Bring him over from Tampa. There's going to be a lot of options open there. So I think that it won't be as sexy, but that big move, I think, will be coming.
Yeah, for sure. And I think, too, like I said, there's plenty of moves that can be made. The trade up, maybe trade for a quarterback, or maybe signing of a quarterback, signing a number 2. You got T. Higgins, Mike Evans. There are multiple guys. Obviously, they have guys. AJ Terrell, got to figure out what you're going to do with him, what that secondary is going to look like. That can look different next year. So there's definitely some moves that are out there to be made, and I think it'll be exciting to see what this team does forward. I'm excited to see the vision and the collaboration between Terry and Raheem and see what that actually ends up looking like at the end of the day. But that's all I got for you, Miles, man. I appreciate you coming on to the show, man, giving me some of your wisdom once again. You know, Miles the GOAT, Garrett, everybody, you know what I'm saying? Give him a round of applause. But let them know where they can find you, man.
I appreciate it, Bryce. Thanks. Yeah, no, most of my Falcons and Bulldogs content, we are official partners with the Georgia Bulldogs and the Atlanta Falcons. You can see all that on Twitter, X, whatever you want to call it today. My handle is Miles Garrett TV. That's where I post most of my stuff. I post it on my YouTube channel as well. Really anywhere that you can consume media, I'll be posting stuff on there. So that's where you can find me. Is if you're in the Atlanta market, Fox5 Atlanta, that's where I'm on here.
Yes, sir. Like I said, guys, it'll be interesting to see what happens this offseason. I think this is going to be a very exciting offseason. I think fans are ready to see what this team's going to look like as the months go on. And like I said, once again, Miles, appreciate you coming on. It's your boy, Bryce Lewis. See you next time.